The Supreme Court chamber had seen its share of drama, but never like this. On that morning, what unfolded inside those marble walls shook not only the legal establishment, but the very idea of how power operates in American democracy. The moment Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett stood her ground against Justice Sonia Sotomayor wasn't just a clash of opinions. It was a generational lightning strike, and it happened in front of the entire nation. One powerful voice interrupted. Another, Justice Sotomayor, appointed by Obama, celebrated as the first Latina on the court, cut off Crockett mid-sentence. Sharp, stern, final. The room froze. Reporters stopped typing. Justices shifted. The air thickened. A rising political force had just been publicly silenced. Or so everyone thought, because what happened next flipped the entire script. Before the confrontation, everything already felt volatile. This wasn't just any day at the court. This was Henderson v. Texas, a redistricting case with massive national consequences. Voting rights, representation, and political control all hung in the balance. And against all expectations, a sitting member of Congress had been granted the rare opportunity to argue before the bench, a privilege almost never given. Traditionalists scoffed. Pundits raised eyebrows. Some said it was a media stunt. But to Jasmine Crockett, it was her duty. Born in St. Louis, forged in Texas courtrooms, Crockett had made her name not through favors, but by fighting tooth and nail for the voiceless. A civil rights attorney turned congresswoman, she wasn't there to perform. She was there to fight. And when she walked into the Supreme Court that day, she brought with her not just legal arguments, but the weight of 760,000 constituents and generations of disenfranchised voters. Her opening words were clear, direct, and bold. Your Honors, I stand before you not just as a legislator, but as a witness to how these laws impact real lives. The chamber leaned in. Justices who rarely looked up during oral arguments paused their note-taking. Even Justice Clarence Thomas glanced away from his desk. But not everyone was impressed. Justice Sotomayor's reaction was immediate. Jaw clenched, pen tapping, body stiffening. And then, like a gavel to the skull, she struck. Congresswoman Crockett, this court is not a political stage. We deal in law, not anecdote. The silence that followed was crushing. Most would have buckled, apologized, deferred. Crockett didn't. Blink. Instead, she stepped forward and delivered what's now being called the most courageous challenge in recent Supreme Court history. Justice Sotomayor, she said, steady as steel. With all due respect, wasn't it personal stories that moved this court in Brown v. Board? Or Gideon v. Wainwright? Didn't you tell stories about your mother, your diabetes, your life in the Bronx during your confirmation hearings? The gallery gasped. Even Chief Justice Roberts sat stunned. She wasn't done. If those stories mattered then, why do the stories of the people I represent suddenly not belong in this room? Why is your journey relevant, but theirs isn't? In those words, she tore through decades of decorum and protocol. But not with disrespect, with logic, with history, with fire. Legal scholars would later say she did something rare in American politics. She didn't just challenge a sitting justice, she reframed the role of the court itself. And for the first time in a long time, a Supreme Court justice didn't push back. Sotomayor sat, her face unreadable, her pen still. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, her posture changed. She was listening, but Crockett wasn't there to bask in a moment. She was there to win an argument. She laid out her legal case. How current redistricting practices dilute minority votes. How past court decisions have eroded protections. How precedent must evolve with the reality of injustice. But she didn't do it in legal jargon. She did it in human language. My people don't quote Madison, she said. They quote rent increases, closed polling places, and lost voices. That's their constitution. When Justice Alito tried to corner her, You asking this court to rewrite decades of precedent for political reasons? She fired back without missing a beat. No, I'm asking this court to finally apply precedent in a way that protects democracy, not just power. At that point, even skeptical justices seemed to respect her command. She wasn't grandstanding. She was practicing law, brilliantly, passionately, relentlessly. And then came the moment that truly flipped the nation's expectations. Justice Sotomayor, once stiff and defensive, leaned forward. "Congresswoman Crockett," she asked, "what exactly are you asking this court to do?" This was it. The shift. The invitation, and Crockett stepped into it without hesitation. "I'm asking this court to remember who the Constitution was written for. To recognize that the law isn't about marble columns or Latin phrases. It's about people, real people, living through decisions made in this room." She pulled out a small card and read the oath she took as a member of Congress. "I do solemnly swear to support and defend the Constitution of the United States." Then she looked at the bench and said what would soon be quoted across news outlets, law schools, and political forums. "This court's legitimacy doesn't come from being above the people. It comes from serving them. And you can't serve people you refuse to hear." It wasn't anger, it was clarity. The kind of clarity that comes when someone speaks not just from knowledge, but from purpose. Justice Sotomayor paused. And then, in the kind of moment that rarely happens in the Supreme Court, she nodded. "Point taken. Congresswoman, please continue." That moment would reverberate across the country like a legal earthquake. By the time the court session ended, Twitter was ablaze. Cable news was scrambling. Legal analysts were calling it the most democratic moment inside the court since Roe v. Wade. Even conservative commentators admitted, you may not agree with her politics, but Crockett delivered a masterclass in advocacy. Law schools began teaching the exchange within days. Clips from the Supreme Court's live stream racked up millions of views. College students said it made them want to go into law. Teachers used it in civics classes. And the hashtag Crockett vs. Court trended for 3 days straight. But something even more remarkable happened next. Justice Sotomayor, were long seen as one of the most confident liberal voices on the bench, spoke at a judicial conference days later. Her words were measured but powerful. "Recently, I was reminded that serving the people requires more than legal knowledge. It requires humility." The legal world sat in stunned silence. A justice had just acknowledged she'd learned something from someone she'd tried to silence. And as for Jasmine Crockett, she didn't crow about the moment. She didn't gloat. In a CNN interview, she said, "I wasn't trying to embarrass anyone. I just wanted the people I represent to matter in that room." Weeks later, the two women shared a private meeting. A source close to the conversation said Sotomayor told Crockett, "You made me think harder. That's what we need more." Oh, woof. In a time when American institutions seem brittle and disconnected, one woman reminded the country what accountability looks like. And another showed that even the highest courts can listen if someone speaks loud enough. The confrontation between Crockett and Sotomayor wasn't chaos. It was evolution. It was democracy. And it was long overdue.